So I came from a playgroup that was really, really casual. Our playgroup really liked Dovescape. A lot of people played Dovescape. In multiple decks, we had Dovescape.
An enchantment that sticks around that says counter that spell.
Counter that spell. But we thought it was so funny.
Like, it's birds now.
Because
Pops into birds.
you were like, all right, I guess we're all playing birds now. And you just make birds. And we were happy to do that. And then I brought Dovescape to a game store when I moved to Los Angeles. And boy, did they not want to play against Dovescape. They were like, do you have a plan for Dovescape? And I was like, other than playing it? No. This episode is sponsored by Factor. Eating better every day has never been easier thanks to Factor's ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. No prep, no mess, just restaurant-quality food in only 2 minutes. Go to factormeals.com/command50 and use code command50 to get 50% off.
Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Weeks, and we have two very special guests. You know them, you love them. It's the boys.
The boys. It's me, Murph, and
as always, me, Jake. To our folks listening in the car.
If you can't see me, it's me, Jake Boss. Today, we are talking about a very exciting topic, actually. I think when a lot of players come to Commander from competitive play or organized play, I feel like they always have the same struggle where it's just like, I built a Commander deck, I brought it to Commander deck night, and I played, and then people got mad at me, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
So because of some, like I played a mass land destruction spell, or I played Winter Orb, which is obviously very powerful.
Ideally, your playgroup will tell you why that wasn't fun, because communication is great. But if not, that's what we're here to do today. Here's what's wrong with you.
Yeah, today we are going to talk about the unwritten rules in Commander. So a lot of the things that sort of get covered by the social contract, and we're gonna address a lot of those rules heads on, and we're going to discuss what it means for Commander overall and what you can sort of glean from those rules. But before we do that, of course, if you want to pick up any Magic cards, you can go to cardkingdom.com/command. They are our affiliate link, so when you go there and you spend your money, you're also sending a little bit of money our way. We're Magic players. We know you're going to buy Magic cards, so you can get double the value by buying cards and supporting a show that you hopefully love. You're here. I don't know.
You got to be careful with that word value, because he'll come running.
I know. Josh.
What's going on in here?
burst in the door.
You getting value without me? Card Kingdom is a great place to get value because they have a huge selection of Magic cards. You can get them in the condition, in the printing that you want. We're Magic players, so we're picky about the kind of cards that go into our deck. Do you want the old border? Do you want the old border foil?
Yes.
It pays to shop at a place that has a huge selection of cards, so when you buy them, they all show up in one package. You're not chasing envelopes through the mail over the course of multiple weeks. You know you're in good hands with Card Kingdom. So,
Card Kingdom, are you in good hands?
Wait, Murph, don't say that.
Oh no! Cardkingdom.com/command.
And another one of our excellent sponsors is Ultra Pro. They have all of the very, very cool accessories that you can use for gaming. They have playmats, sleeves, deck boxes, dice, anything that you could ever want or need to spice up your gameplay. UltraPro.com/command is the best place to go. There's also Ultra Pro product at your local game store all over the place. But if you go to their website, they got flash sales, flash deals all the time with like up to maybe 50% off of awesome stuff. Just sign up for their newsletter and they'll just say, hey, you want to come buy cool things? And you say, yes, I do. I want that. And I can get it for super cheap. Again, ultrapro.com/command.
We love when you support our sponsors, because that's the reason that we all get to be here. A couple of guys started a podcast a long time ago, and the people along the way who helped them, Card Kingdoms and Ultra Pros of the world, are why we get to be here.
And now we're here.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah, it's really cool. Thank you.
The final way you can support us is directly by going to patreon.com/command zone. We have a very special announcement for patrons. If you are a patron, we are now opening auditions for extra turns. You can audition to be on extra turns, play your deck, we'll fly you out. You can come play with us. We're opening auditions today, or they're already open.
Depending on when this comes out.
But in order to apply, you make a less than 2-minute video. You tell a little story about your favorite pet card and tell us why it's your pet card, and you submit it to the link that's down below. They're going to give you all of the information. Make sure you submit it before April 12th. Terms and conditions do apply. You will find out all about those in the link below.
I'm excited about that. It's going to be fun to get some patrons in here and some folks from Whatnot and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to be a hoot and a holler. The extra turn shoots are really fun.
Really fun.
It's a good time.
And if you're not a patron, you can sign up and then you can audition. You should do it. It's going to be a ton of fun. Plus, patrons get a special shout out every single podcast episode. And this one is dedicated to Kenji Madden. Kenji, you rock. All
Love
right.
those patrons.
Well, they're the best. And they get to come hang out with us. I'm excited. XT auditions. We got game nights auditions. Not yet, but soon.
But soon.
All right, let's get into the main topic. No more ado. Today we're talking about the unwritten rules of Commander. Some say that Commander's greatest trait is its flexibility, right? Its general appeal. It's permissive and it's open-ended, and it gives the players a chance to sculpt the kind of play experience that they want to have. And as a result, Commander is full of house rules and personal preferences and power discrepancies because different people like to play different ways. And while that is Commander's greatest strength, it is also Commander's, strongest sticking point, because there's a lot of blurry lines that can lead to power imbalances and preference clashes, especially when you're playing with strangers.
Yeah, that's perhaps the biggest problem just overall with Commander is that everybody has something that they want to do, some preconceived notion, some expectation that they bring to the table, and trying to match all of that up together is difficult.
And I think we're all three very different people, and that's part of why this is a 3-person podcast right now.
Yeah.
Is I like to think that I come from, the beer and pretzels type of Commander. You guys are so in it with, your decks are up to date. You know what I mean? But I feel like I'm a little bit more on Murph's, side-eyeing right now. Maybe his decks ain't that up to date.
Not that. I'm trying to think, are my decks up to date? I'm like, I really should go to cardkingdom.com/command and get some stuff.
That calls back to what we said before.
Yeah.
That's perfect. No, I think that we have different opinions on things, and some places we're going to sync up, and we're all going to, it's going to be like we're talking about unwritten axioms, and then at some points it'll be, well, I don't really feel that way. And I think it's important to know that this is a safe environment to speak our minds. We're all pretty good friends. We know each other for a really long time.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see where this goes.
Yeah. Hopefully we're going to try to define some of these more blurry lines a little bit here today. And also another caveat is that these rules, we don't all believe every single one of these unwritten rules, but they are all at least reasonably commonly held rules, or something that we've at least heard of before in play groups or play experiences that we've been a part of.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we want to talk about these today.
Yeah, we're going to talk about our personal relationship to those rules, because we've all been in various playgroups. We've played at work together. We've also played in more powerful playgroups.
We played until sunrise before. Different states and all across the country. And
Absolutely. We played a lot. We played at MagicCons. I feel like we have a very diverse experience. And these are the rules that I think you can commonly expect in especially unknown Commander situations.
Yes.
When you're playing against strangers, these are things that you can roughly guess about them. But it's not going to be true for everybody. These are not universally held beliefs. And, we'll cover all the perspectives that we possibly can. But we're only 3 people. We played a lot of Magic, though. So the first rule we're going to talk about, I put rule in quotes here, is don't play mass land destruction. Never play mass land destruction in Commander.
We're Commander players. Commander players do not like people touching their lands.
We're very sensitive about our lands.
Yeah, you can run a Ghost Quarter or a Strip Mine to take care of that Gaia's Cradle or a problematic land, but if you're doing mass land destruction, blow up all the lands, that's a big no-no for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, like in 1v1, mass land destruction is a strategy used to lock up a game. When you're ahead, you slam, you blow up an Armageddon, you blow up all the lands, and now you hold your position. In Commander, mass land destruction can be applied that way, but I've certainly played against decks where it's mass land destruction is the theme.
Yeah.
Which is, we're Commander players, we build very thematically. We like a deck to have like an idea, like a thesis.
Yeah.
Yeah. A point.
And mass land destruction is a terrible thesis.
No. Like, if you know that this unwritten rule kind of exists and you choose to do it, then you're trying to get a certain reaction. Like, I think one of the things we should talk about really early on in this show is it's all about, what are you trying to do? What feelings are you trying to give your group? What do you want to put out there? If you want to antagonize everybody, or if you want to be more pub stompy in an environment that isn't expecting it, this is a great way to do that. It's great.
And a lot of people will say, like, oh, if you don't like mass land destruction so much, why isn't it on the ban list? Why don't you ban mass land destruction?
You know what? That's a good point. Let's just ban Armageddon. Good idea, Rachel.
I'm calling the rules committee.
What about Catholic?
Hello, rules committee.
I looked it up, and there are 49 legal cards in Commander that blow up all the lands. So if we ban mass land destruction in Commander, we would suddenly add 50 cards to the ban list.
Hey, Murph, what's that second card there? What was that? Armageddon. What's that one right
card?
there?
Cataclysm?
Oh.
You mean the one that I've literally played against you in one of my casual decks?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I played that card.
Hey, but it has the weather light on it. It's got to go on my weather light.
All right, so...
He's sitting there over here telling a whole story about we're Commander players, and I'm thinking Cataclysm, though.
That sounds familiar.
Context.
I mean,
Okay.
that's the next question is, do
Yeah.
you play mass land destruction? And clearly Murph.
Does. So, first of all, I don't mind mass land destruction. I do understand very much so why it frustrates people, because if all the lands are blown up, then you're just sitting there doing nothing. And that is a big feels bad for a lot of people. The reason that I had Cataclysm in a deck was because I built a Vorthos deck built around the Weatherlights and its crew. And the original printing of Cataclysm just so happens to have the Weatherlight on it. And I was pretty hard up for playables in this deck. And so I'm like, I need a board wipe. In it goes. And so I've taken it out since then, to be clear. But that was definitely a card that I had to play a couple times, see people's reactions, see what it did to the game, for me to kind of realize, I don't like this.
Well, I've had the same problem too, because I played an enchantment deck for a long time, and I think I was playing my enchantment deck against you at the time, where when you combine Enchanted Evening and Opalescence, it kills all lands because they have no cost. So there's 0/0s. And you only have to do that once or twice before you realize, wow, this is not fun at all.
Yeah.
Like, this thing that I thought was a nifty little interaction is just mass land destruction.
Yeah, it's build your own mass land destruction at home, even though neither of those cards are specifically one of the cards. That to another point where even if we ban all 50 of those cards, you can still find a way around it and get that mass land destruction to happen with cards that don't necessarily mean that.
But when somebody drops an Armageddon, and it has happened with folks that we know, who we invited over and will invite back again.
Yes.
Like, when it happens, sure, I love to rise to a challenge.
Yeah.
Like, if somebody wants to play Prison against me, if they want to, counter me a million times, destroy my lands, whatever, I'm not scooping. Because you know what feels really good against mass land destruction? Winning.
It's true. They can oftentimes create board states that can create games where you say, okay, we're all behind. They had an Avacyn and they mass land destructioned us, and we have to figure out how to claw back and fight back. And if you can overcome that, that is a great story. That is something that you will remember for a long time to come. And that's something that could not exist without the mass land destruction.
Yeah.
I want to mention this because I currently play mass land destruction in my mono white deck.
Okay.
I run Catastrophe, which is what I was looking up.
Yep.
Brave of you to admit. Okay.
I do like Catastrophe.
Catastrophe is a 6-mana sorcery that says either destroy all creatures or destroy all lands. So if you're behind,
modal.
if you're behind, you wipe the board, clear all the creatures. If you're ahead, you wipe the lands and you win with your board.
Yep.
I've cast it twice to try and blow up all lands. One time it got counterspelled, and the other time I won the next turn. So it's
That's true. If you're sending me
Like-
home, then that's cool too.
so I think there is a scenario where I'm comfortable with mass land destruction.
Yeah.
And this deck used to run Armageddon because it was supposed to be a like mono white good stuff list. And I was like, I'll spend it if I'm ahead. But it was dead half the time.
Yeah.
Because most of the time you're not ahead in white. But I do really like Catastrophe because it gives you that option where it's like it's either something like it's either good here or it's good here. And when you have the option to, slam the door and be like, nobody's board wiping, I'm hanging onto my board and I'm going to try and close this game out, that's fine. That's a tool that white has and is fine with me. But if your thesis is blow up all the lands and make sure no one can accrue resources, now that's where I have a problem with mass land destruction in Commander.
That's like, would I rather not play versus play in that situation? I think I wouldn't even shuffle up. If I knew that that's what I was walking into.
Yeah.
You just, again, you need to ask yourself, what am I trying to do? If I'm trying to antagonize people, then there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can make fun of people to their face. You can poke them with a little screwdriver, or you can play mass land destruction. There's a lot of ways to get that job done. You have to, why would you do that?
About antagonizing people in Commander is like you can antagonize people in organized play because they have to play against you. They've been paired with you.
Right. Yeah.
In Commander, they just won't play with you again. And now you've lost an opportunity to play the thing you've created. So there is an upside to creating decks that people enjoy playing against. And that means that you get to curate your own space rather than getting thrown out of others.
You do a lot more waiting in Commander too. In 1v1, I'm waiting on your turn, but I'm waiting on 3 people's turns for it to get to my turn. And I chose to be here rather than being at home with my loved ones. And I got a sitter today. And this is the one day that I could make it to Commander night or whatever. And I showed up late, so it was the one game I could get in, and I'm stuck playing against somebody who thinks it's funny to just destroy all lands.
Yeah.
So the next rule that we're going to talk about is similar. It has a similar sort of feel bad and a similar sort of hatred in Commander, and it's don't play mass discard. Don't strip people of their hands. This includes doing like a Narset wheel thing.
Yeah.
It's do not deprive the table of their options.
Yeah, it's not a very yes-and maneuver.
Yeah.
I will say I have more of a problem with this than mass land destruction.
Yes.
It's weird. I was thinking about this before we started, and what ends up happening with mass land destruction versus mass discard is mass land destruction, it basically gives you mana screw, whereas mass discard basically gives you mana flood, where you just don't have anything to do with your mana.
That's a good way to put it.
No matter what. So usually mana flood is... Actually, I don't know if that's true, if mana flood or mana screw is particularly better, but... I personally have less of a hard time if I'm mana flooded, because then I'm like, if I rip something off the top, at least I can play it.
Do I want my foot on the gas, or do I want my foot on the wheel?
Exactly. But when it comes to Commander with this mass land destruction versus mass discard, I very much agree with you, whereas mass discard just feels a little bit worse. And I'm not entirely sure why.
I think it's because Commander is about game actions. And when you do not have, like, when you're having the most fun in Commander is when you're doing the most.
Yeah.
So when you deprive all of your opponents, and often yourself, of the opportunity to do anything more than just draw a card and hope it's a spell, that you're taking away their ability to participate in the game. Where if you blow up all their lands... They can still hit land drops. They can still cast spells in their hand. They can still be flexible. They might still have rocks on the board. There's still options. And most of the time, when all the lands are blown up, the game's over. If they strip your hand, they haven't furthered the game at all. They haven't put themselves in a more of a position to win. They've just prevented you from playing.
It's a lot more like suffocation rather than a big blow to your plan.
Yeah.
And this is also often, I think Mind Slicer is a very common version of this effect where people think it's fun to play Mind Slicer and loop Mind Slicers, and it just... You're like, great, kill me.
That was literally exactly that. A lesson that I learned after about a year of playing Commander. I had the Chainer deck. That was my first Commander. I'm like, ooh, what if I put Mind Slicer in? Because I can play the Mind Slicer, sack the Mind Slicer, bring it back, make sure nobody else can do anything. And I obviously have mana to activate Chainer, so I can continue to do things, whereas nobody else can. So I'm like, that'll be great. And then I played it a few times and was like, this is miserable. I don't like this. Am I winning? Yes. But it takes some time, and nobody else is having fun. So why is this in here? So I eventually just took it out and just went on with my life and put it in cards that I thought the table would enjoy a little bit more.
I think a lot of people go through this growth period as a player where you're like, oh, I can play 8 mana enchantments in Commander? Here's a deck. And your curve is insane. And then you go through this adolescence period where you're like, oh, I can do this, and that goes with that, and then I do this. And then the growth past that is, here's probably why I won't do that.
Yeah.
I know how to do that. I won't do that.
Yeah.
Like if you go to a jazz club or something, just watch that drummer. He can throw down. He's not gonna.
Yeah.
He can do it one time a night. Zap doop doom zap da pop. And
I've tried it. I know what it's like.
It's just basic rock beat.
Yeah, I think a big difference for me is like mass land destruction can be okay depending on how it's deployed. Mass hand removal, I don't think I am never comfortable with. There's never a scenario where I'm like, this is okay.
You're here to play cards, and I will not let you play cards.
Yeah, it's just, it feels like now you've removed your 3 opponents. Great, we're gonna slowly watch you play.
Yeah, thankfully with mass discard, the commander tends to give away that you are playing a mass discard strategy. So if you're playing something like Turgid, well, we know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
You're going to strip our hands. And that's one of the reasons why people don't like that commander very much. Same with Tiny Bones. You look at that and you think, oh, well, they're just going to make me discard lots of cards and then accrue advantage off of that. So you can usually look at that and say, I don't know if I want to play in this pod, or I don't really want to play against that deck. You got anything else? So it's usually something that you can identify early on, which I do like about it. But yeah, if you're in the middle of a game and suddenly your entire hand gets stripped, it is such a feel bad.
Yeah.
Were you in that game with me? This
a lot
was
of games with you,
yeah. So this was a game at Post Malone party one time.
Okay.
And turn 1, our opponent wheels.
I don't think I was in that game with you.
Okay, well, that's the story.
Like we mulligan everybody.
Yep.
And then, and I didn't draw any lands. So I sat there and did nothing the whole game.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, "Oh, do you want us to scoop or whatever?" I'm like, "I got the time.
Yeah. All right.
Let's just do it." Like,
Yeah.
That's a lot of the time I call the bluff on like, okay, either I'm gonna rise to the challenge and overcome the suffocation or the mass land destruction, or you're going to see how it makes everybody feel or what the effect is of what you did, rather than like, oh, you just did some bombastic thing that was silly, then we all started a new game. That card doesn't say start a new game. It says you got rid of my hand.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this is an interesting one. I don't think it's as popular I think people,
are that popular. For that matter,
people are pretty wise about
think
it. Who's
generally-
really played against Tiny Bones and all that stuff all that often?
And really, I haven't had my hand wheeled like Narset wheeled since Hull Breacher was banned.
Yeah.
Because I got it. It happened a lot when Hull Breacher was legal.
I think that's because people were like, Hull Breacher, value, it gives me treasures. In it goes, it's a pirate, hee hee funny. And you're like, no.
No, don't.
do that.
No, don't. All right, this next one sort of rhymes with the other two that we've mentioned before, but it's don't monopolize the chess clock. And what that means is just take up way more time than your opponents do. So mass discard can kind of rhyme with that because it's usually I'll keep my hand, you guys lose yours. But it's also like in 1v1, there's guardrails for this, right? There's judges, you can call them for like slow play, or there's just chess clocks generally in MTGO. You're limited in time. Commander, there's no guardrails. So when your turn gets longer and longer and longer, and you're making 3 times the number of people wait, it becomes more and more and more frustrating to play against.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of strategies that do this, that like create an engine and sort of dirtle. This also applies to an extra turns deck.
Like at least if you feign a sense of urgency, or if it's clear that you have a plan, or like, oh, I can't find the one card that I'm tutoring for, rather than, what does this card do again? Okay, I'm between these 5 cards as I'm tutoring. Like, dude, you got to pick something. You have to make a choice that is not optimal right now.
Yeah.
Because this is my time.
That is exactly what I want to talk about, because I do think this is a huge difference between competitive play and commander play. Is commander players make suboptimal decisions all the time to conserve time.
Oh yeah.
Like we fetch on our opponent's turns. We will tutor and pass the turn. And the next player will start while the tutoring is happening, which obviously gives the tutoring player more information, but it conserves time for everybody at the table.
Yeah.
We a lot of the time, if you've got a complicated sequence, you just start. You're like, I don't know. I'll cast this and just see how the turn happens.
Yeah, and if you're like, oh wait, I think I did that wrong. Can I back up a couple steps? People are usually like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. And it's those kind of things obviously don't mean you don't play as precisely, but they save the table time and they mean that people aren't just sitting there watching you fetch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for us, like what makes our show so hard to make is we have to do everything optimally, or we risk invalidating the game for the viewer.
Yeah.
Like cracking fetches at socially appropriate times versus the absolute optimal time and all that. Like that's what I love so much about the live shows is we would use the clock to be like, oh, I'm going to crash my fetch on Jimmy's turn. And the clock was all about like, we don't want people to just sit around and watch Josh be like, should I get a forest?
Yeah.
Or a surveillant or a triumph? What's best here?
Eventually, people like kind of got the hang of it, and they were like, "Oh, so this is how we're doing it."
Right.
Versus on game nights, where what the audience does not see is you sit there, you are searching, you're like, "Do I get this? Do I get this? I don't know what to get." And then it's like, "Oh, take your time. Oh, if you're not sure, let's pull up a deck list on the side. You can take a look through your deck list."
That's what your team's whole job is.
Exactly.
Is cutting out all that boring crap because there's so damn much of it.
I mean, I think this is really interesting because we do all the tutoring to conserve time, but there's other choices that you make that are suboptimal to protect the game.
Nope, not me.
Where
Completely
it's like
optimal.
all the way,
all the way optimal.
straight and narrow. Never
That's
made
true.
a mistake. No mistakes, Murph is what we call him. You'll see players run out win cons or unprotected just to be like, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I don't care. I think flunging is funny.
Yeah, you're like, players don't play board wipes when they're gonna die just because, you know what? It's time for the game to be over.
Yep.
Like, I could play this board wipe, but all we're gonna do is rebuild.
See, that's interesting.
yeah.
I never do that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I know if you have it, you slam it.
Yeah. If I have it, if I think it can give me any sort of like chance in the game, I will do it.
Yeah.
Even if
That's where.
But if it
we're
doesn't,
different.
if it doesn't give you a chance, if you're like, look, I got 2 other cards in hand, I'm not going to close it out. Do you play it?
I mean, it'll give me a better chance than absolutely dying.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I would rather let somebody have the small bit of joy that they get. Like if we're talking about a lunch manager game where we got to end at a certain point.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'd rather just flunge and then eat it.
Yeah, I
For
mean,
example, in a game just now, I cast the card delete for 16. I was at 17. I go to 1. I
Jake loves
swing
this
a
card.
Damon.
He's me with it like twice or 3 times now.
I love deleting Murph. So I swing a Damon with an Ultra Magnus, and I put out a Blightsteel Colossus going at the other player, and I'm going to win, okay? But then Damon ventures into a dungeon, and each player loses 1 life, and I die. There was no planet where I needed to do 16. But I was like, you know what would be funny is if I did everything but 1 life. If I had done 1 less, I would have won. But that's the type of like suboptimal play of like, okay, quick decision, that one.
Yeah. I'll go to 1. I don't know. I'll draw everything in my deck except 3.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's an arbitrary decision, but I'll put 3 in there.
But I got to make a decision right now. I could do the math and get it right, or I could just move on with my life. And what we're trying to do is have the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. It's going to be one of us. So,
Yeah, that being said, I still feel like that's a little bit different than sandbagging a board wipe or not, because that one is, you know what? I think I got this. If I don't, no biggie, but we're just going to go for it versus a board wipe of, I don't think I got this. Let me try and like fight my way back because like we were talking about, I think that the best games are the ones where you are down a bunch and you have to figure out how to fight your way back. Those stories don't start unless you start trying. And personally, unless obviously we do have a time constraint. If there's
right. Like we were going to catch a flight recently.
Yeah, if there's a
Would
time
you have wiped
constraint.
the board?
No,
when we
that's a
started boarding
totally,
the plane?
totally different story.
Is it?
Yeah, if there's a time restraint
Okay.
and we're like, oh, well, we have to be somewhere in 20 minutes, then yes, we're under somewhat different rules. But if it's just a regular game of Commander at a Commander night, nobody has a particular time to be home, then I will do that 100% of the time because, I don't know, I just want to at least feel like I've tried. And I want other people, when they play against me, to try their best as well.
Yeah, I think when it's time to compete and be in that mode, that's one type of thing. But I just find myself not being in competitive mode. If I'm on the way out and I'm going to die, I'll block and kill that creature because I hate it, and I'll just let the rest come through.
Or do that.
I'll let the rest come through. All right, you guys have a great game.
Yeah.
You know, versus like I'll see players who are very skilled be like, let me block this, that, and then I'll die.
Yeah.
Brother, you're gone.
That's something that Josh does very often where he
I wasn't going to say it, but that was who I was thinking of.
well, he said it on the podcast multiple times, and
Yeah.
you can see it in the gameplay.
So there's consequences for
Yeah, he's like,
yeah.
if you're going to take me out, I'm going to go down like throwing the last punch. Like there has to be consequence for you trying to take me out. There has to be something that's it's costing you. And I think that's reasonable. Do I do that every time? No, but I totally understand that perspective.
Yeah. The interesting thing about these three rules that we discussed, no mass land destruction, no mass discard, don't monopolize the chess clock, is I think they all can sort of be rolled up into one thing where we're like, we don't necessarily believe no mass land destruction. We probably believe no mass discard. And we understand that the chess clock is kind of a vibes thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what they can all sort of be synthesized into is Commander players do not like actions that just slow the game down,
Yeah.
that only drag things out. Because Commander games are long. There's 4 people dedicating their time to this. And if you can make game actions that don't further your position in the game and just make things slower, that's where the majority of Commander players can get very frustrated.
Yeah. Honestly, even if you are progressing your game, even if it's just incrementally, then there can definitely still be that, well, I am sitting here doing absolutely nothing, and that is not fun. Like you were saying, a lot of people will say, hey, this is the 1 or 2 few games that I can play. Like if you've ever been to a Magic convention, you kind of go into it expecting, I'm going to play like 10, 15 games of Commander. At the end of the day, after a single day, you're like, I got a 3.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And I got sick.
I think this is interesting because we were talking about this the other day. Commander players in a week will play like 3 games.
Yeah.
Maybe. Like, and we play a lot.
Yeah, I think if
Right,
you have
like-
an office full of people who can play.
Yeah.
Yeah, but before I was,
Yeah.
working at this spot, I would get to play once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe once every 3 weeks, depending on
And how many games do you play?
if I wanted to do something on a Wednesday.
Like 2, maybe 3 games every 2 weeks, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas 1v1 players, if you're new to Commander and you come from this organized play thing, you play 20 games.
Yeah.
Because
You
there's
play
so many
25
different
games.
options for you for what
Because they're shorter and you can
and-
play like you play 3 in a match.
Yeah, you play
imagine
arena all day long.
All day long. You play so many games. So if you have one bad game, it doesn't matter. If you're like, ugh, that game was not fun at all, it doesn't matter because you have another game lined up.
Yeah.
In Commander, if you're playing 3 games in a week and one of them is terrible and you do nothing, you didn't get to actually participate in the games that you got to play. So those games are so much more precious to Commander players than they are to anybody who plays 1v1.
Yeah, it's not just the game length too, because in 1v1, you're taking up approximately half of the time with your game actions. In a game of Commander, it's way longer, and you're only 1/4 of that. So your initial game actions are going to be less. And so what a lot of people will do when they build decks is, oh, I want to do lots of things. The problem with that is that the more things that you do, automatically that means the less stuff other people do. So yes, you do want to do a lot of things, but you also have to be cognizant that you're not going too far with that and making it unfun for other people.
I think 1v1 can be a lot of call and response too.
Yeah.
A lot like fencing of, parry, thrust.
Yep.
Like, but Commander is a lot more like the fire making challenge in Survivor, where you're trying to get something off the ground and then there's a little spark and it catches and you're like, oh. And then you're trying to watch these people and you're like, oh, that guy's so far behind. There's no way that and she burned it. The little flag. Jeff goes like this.
Come on in, guys. We literally used to do that in Boy Scout. At Boy Scout camp, we would get all the troops together, and that was one of the challenges that we would do is you would have to build a fire, and then you burn the rope exactly like that.
But what's really not fun is when you watch somebody not even able to spark the flint.
Yes.
Which I think encompasses the first 2 of these rules pretty well.
Or when
That's
somebody
great.
just dumps gasoline on their thing and then lights a fire, like, easy fire made.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm trying to do this with a flint? Why did you bring gasoline?
Do that.
They don't know where they're at.
Like many of the blurry lines in Commander, the next rule that we are going to talk about actually kind of contradicts with what we've talked about so far. And that can be some of the frustrating things about playing Commander. But we're going to get to those rules and many more after a few words from our sponsors.
If you're watching this, that means you like games, specifically strategy card games.
Yeah, and we've got a new one to share with you here that we've been playing around the office a ton. It's called Kinfire Delve Scorn Stockade.
It's basically a dungeon run where you face a series of challenges before taking on a powerful final boss.
And it really is perfect for Magic players. It lets you use your skills from Commander, but in a co-op setting that rewards you for good threat assessment, teamwork, and planning ahead.
Scorn Stockade is easy to learn, but you've got to be smart if you want to win, because the challenges change every single time you play. We've jammed a ton of games and they've all felt different, which is pretty impressive considering it's only $20.
Yeah, it is an amazingly high-quality product at that price. The cards, the dice, even the box, they all feel premium.
On its own, Scorn Stockade supports up to 2 players, but if you pick up the previous Kinfire Delve set, Vainglory's Grotto, you can combine them and play with 4 people. So it's great for mixing things up with your Commander pod.
Exactly. It'll give you a chance to work together and, heal the wounds from those shady political deals that you made.
That's more of a you problem, Josh.
What? No, everyone's always happy with all the deals they make with me, aren't they? Order Kinfire Delve Scorn Stockade at kinfiredelve.com and use code COMMAND10 at checkout for 10% off. That's a whole lot of game for just $20. Plus, pick up the first set, Vainglory's Grotto, for the full 4-player experience. Again, that's kinfiredelve.com and use code COMMAND10 to score 10% off.
Detective Alquist Proft, personal notes. The case of the fast feast. It was a stormy Friday night when Tessa Karloff wandered into my office, asking the impossible.
I'm looking to eat opulently, but I only have 2 minutes to cook.
2 minutes? I could crack a case in 2 minutes. But a full meal?
Have I finally stumped Ravnica's greatest detective?
Not yet. You forgot to factor in one thing. Factor. They deliver chef-crafted meals right to your door that are ready to eat in only 2 minutes. And with over 35 pre-prepared options each week, including vegetarian and calorie-smart, Factor has truly solved making upscale dining fast and easy. Plus, Factor won't cost you all your treasures and tithes. It's less expensive than takeout, and even offers the flexibility of letting you pause or reschedule anytime. My favorite meal is the smoky Gouda chicken. Delectable restaurant quality from the comfort of my dimly lit office. Here, dig in.
Could it possibly be that simple? Just heat and eat? This is to die for.
Head to factormeals.com/command50 and use code command50 to get 50% off. That's code command50 at factormeals.com/command50 to get 50% off. Browsing for some new tech?
Yeah, I'm building Tiamat and Architect. Ooh, how about Zergo and Ojutai?
Did you just drag and drop that card image directly into your deck?
Yep, with Architect, you can drag and drop card images from EDH, Rec, or Scryfall directly into the deck list. No typing required.
That is so cool.
Ooh, okay, check this out. I'm gonna drag and drop Dragon Storm into the deck, and then boom, I'm gonna drop a bunch of dragons on the battlefield.
A 9-drop, huh? Seems ambitious.
It was just for the pun. Architect is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest Commander decks. Just go to architect.com/command-zone to get started.
That's archidekt.com/command-zone.
Welcome back, everybody. We are talking about the unwritten rules in Commander.
Written here on this sheet of paper.
On this. We wrote them down.
We wrote down the unwritten rules, so we have to
So
change
I
the
suppose
name
they're
of the
now
episode
written.
now.
This is a cursed piece of paper.
I'm sorry. We're going to have to burn these after. I promised a rule that contradicts everything we've been talking about before, where we're like consciously trying not to extend the game of Commander. Mm-hmm. But I've also heard the rule that we just don't concede. Commander players don't concede ever.
Yeah.
Especially compared to 1v1 players, where you're like, when you've lost the edge and you do not think you will recover, you're like, yeah, I'm done. I
extend
concede.
the hand.
Yeah.
I will
totally fine.
Conceding, I love conceding for the benefit of others.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell a story about Chicago. Okay. There is this awesome kid who I get to play with every single time, and he was really excited. He wanted to go meet his buddies and stuff, and we're there with his dad, and and I had been there playing a long time. My back was killing me and all this stuff, but it really didn't hurt that he wanted to get up and go meet this creator who was about to leave or something like that. And I was like, guys, I think I gotta go. I don't think I can finish this game. It was my favorite concession ever.
Yeah.
And that vibe is probably like on the higher end of the spectrum, but it is a spectrum. On the lower end too, like if this is miserable, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
What are we trying to get out of this?
I think that's a fascinating thing because I do think Commander players expect a full arc. Like I have a game from when I was new in Commander where I was playing an underpowered deck against a mono blue Chainveil Teferi deck.
What?
Yeah. Yep. And I know now
Great
that
pod.
was completely insane. But at the time, I was like, I didn't know. And at one point, he goes, I make infinite mana and I draw my whole deck. And I go, how do we die, though?
Yeah. I love that.
I wanted to die. I wasn't dead.
Yeah.
And I was like, sure.
But I'm still alive.
But like, how do you
win?
How are you winning right now?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to know how the game ended. Because if you just do all that, then it's like, I'm still at 40. I've got like some stuff going on.
Come at me.
And then he was like, all right, I capsize all of your permanents. I take infinite turns and I kill you with a Mold Drifter. And I was like, what a horrible story
Can we play it out?
for this game. Yeah. And I was like, I guess you have me. I remember being like I didn't want to just be like, all right, I guess we're done and scoop it up.
Yeah.
Because I'm used to playing board games where you play until you win. And when you win, you ta-da, we did it. Go to bed.
Yeah.
So that was that felt bad to you, right?
That felt bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I wanted to play until the game was over. And obviously I wasn't going to win the game at some point.
Yeah.
But
It is kind of condescending to like, rather than ask, like,
Yeah.
do you guys feel like that's it?
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
Yeah.
Rather than saying I draw my whole deck and I
Yeah.
just win.
yeah.
Like,
I was like, okay.
I don't know, man. There's a lot of free stuff out there.
Yeah.
I don't need to tell you. That's another thing lately that, like, when you have to tell somebody, what are you targeting?
Yeah.
As we just kind of speed through things,
Yeah.
like, no. I need you to name that target first.
Yeah.
Like, that's the same kind of thing as, like, I just draw the whole deck and I win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Like you don't want to tip your hand,
Be polite.
but people are just like trying to shortcut things, possibly to help with the
To
previous
save time.
problem to save
Yeah.
time.
So I think conceding is really interesting, and I think it's a big culture difference between 1v1 and in Commander, where like I concede, you got it, we're done. But in Commander, there's an expectation that even if you lock the board out, the game ends. You win. My life total goes to 0. My deck disappears. Like, you do the thing. So I think it's really important that you build a deck that can do that, that can win the game concretely and like obviously and quickly.
Yeah, if you have your whole deck, then I think you need to memorize your lines.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I really like about playing with those competitive players who aren't quite CEDH.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're more like rich EDH.
Rich EDH? No, that doesn't work.
We played with a few
It's
people
ED
like
rich.
that.
Yeah.
ED Rich.
Yeah.
What I like about playing with players like that is a lot of them have this like athletic mindset too. Like obviously, Cassius is like this where when he's got a deck, he knows his lines.
Yes.
I love that.
He knows his plays.
Because it shows you've practiced.
Yeah.
You know stuff. And I've told this story on the podcast before, but one time I dropped a Felidar Guardian and Cash, Joe, and Post start scooping up. I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, well, you win, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, do I? No, I just make another clue.
But yeah, that is.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what being competitive and, taking what you do seriously can give you, rather than like that's the type of thing that you should have in that situation is
Right.
No, okay, if you want to know, here's what I do.
Yeah.
Right.
It's this card to this card to this card, and then it's over.
That's one of the reasons
Because-
why. Oh, go ahead.
I feel like Commander players, we'll talk about this in a second, but Commander players expect a story arc,
Yeah.
right? Where the game, everybody builds, everybody races, somebody wins, we handle it, somebody wins, they handle it, and then the game ends, like somebody wins the game. And if you go from like slowly you're squeezed to death until your opponents want to leave, it's just not a movie I would watch.
No.
Like about a boa constrictor that slowly kills somebody. Horrible. And so you really, when you build a deck that's the intended story, it really affects how the people's expectation of the game.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to what are you doing here? When you showed up today, what emotions did you think? Did you think that everyone, when you sat down to that table, you learned everybody's name, everyone was going to go, oh, or everyone was going to go, okay, that was pretty cool. I've never seen that before. Or you wanted to make everybody submit to your will.
Yeah. One thing before we move on from conceding is that I feel like one of the big taboos of conceding is where you will concede to like screw another player over, where someone's like, all right, I think I got this. All right, do this, do this, do this, do this. All right, I just have to connect with my Sword of Feast and Famine. All right, Jake, I'm going to attack you with my creature with Sword of Feast and Famine. You're like, all right, in response, scoop. You don't get that trigger. And that is something that's obviously you should not be doing.
All right, we should play this out. All right, Murph, I want you to scoop to screw Rachel over, okay? Murph, I'm going to attack you with my 91/91 double strike lifelinker.
Okay.
Wait, you're screwing me over.
Yeah, I'm screwing you over.
And handing it to Rachel, okay?
Exactly.
And now what do
I'm just going to scoop. No combat damage.
I attack you with my 3/3 in the air.
Hey, Murph, come here.
Yeah.
Listen, when you do stuff like... Rachel, I'm trying to talk to Murph right now.
Sorry.
When you do stuff like that, it kind of warps the game and invalidates our whole thing that we've been building to.
Yeah.
Like, we all sat here for an hour and a half kind of doing this, and I'm glad you had fun. Whatever, we all get to play cards, and it was awesome. But the one note I would give is I just didn't enjoy that.
Yeah.
That type of conversation is so easy to have.
Yeah.
I think that is where conceding in and of itself gets a bad rap. So as far as me personally, I'll always just kind of house rule sorcery speed concessions only, but I don't think conceding in and of itself is a bad thing, especially with how much of a bad rap it gets.
Here's the thing, is we say concede at sorcery speed.
Yeah.
But what we mean is don't weaponize concessions.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's like
That's
making
like,
a rule out of this.
That's what we mean.
Yeah.
But the thing is, a lot, Commander players expect rules.
Yeah.
And a rule is only concede at sorcery speed. But the truth of that is be nice.
We're Magic players. We love
Exactly.
we love min-maxing things.
What I love is you give me a rule, I know how to exploit it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you give me a card every single turn, and I'm allowed to play a land without, any extra rules.
How far
I'll
can I
abuse
push this?
those.
Yeah.
How far can I push this?
Sure.
And that's just kind of...
I have to discard at the end of my turn? Okay, what can I do with that?
Yeah, and I totally understand that is what Magic players are at their core, but at the same time, you just have to be cognizant of the other people that you're playing with in Commander. That's just how Commander works. I'm sorry. It's a social game by definition.
It's a social game.
We're super in tune. Like, we say it a few different times. Invalidating the game is the biggest danger. When we're talking about live shows, we have a couple cool ideas for, okay, what if the audience could, whoever they wanted to win, they get a bonus, they get to draw a card, or they get a treasure token or something. What happens when you do that is suddenly it wasn't a game of Commander anymore. It was a game of audience Commander.
Yeah.
Like, that's why we love the Cube of Consequence, is because it's fair, but when you start monkeying with the rules like that, it's...
Yeah, it's concession is a tricky point, and honestly, we could do a whole episode about concession alone. But
I love popcorn.
We're going to get to the summary of all of these rules in a second. So the next one is one you hear all the time, and it's don't win out of nowhere. No infinite combos, or no Torment of Hailfires, or no what's the word? The spell expropriates, where if you resolve one spell,
Murph.
If you resolve one spell, the game was over, right?
My games are never over with expropriate because I'm too bad of a player.
See, it's really funny because Jake plays expropriate, but doesn't play any Torment of Hailfire effects, and I don't think ever would. I play Torment of Hailfire effects, but don't play expropriate, and I don't think I ever would, which is bizarre to me.
Okay, well, the deck that expropriate is in.
I don't play either of those things.
So,
you guys need to be putting some respect on my name here, because the only deck that plays expropriate, well, I guess 11 does.
Yeah.
But
You got two decks with it. What do you mean?
Easy, Murph. It's Myra the Magnificent is where I casually will play that card, because you tuck that under something and you get multiple expropriates in a turn.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like you're probably going to go off and do the thing and have the carnival explosion that you need to, or...
Yeah.
But here's the problem.
It's too whack.
Here's the problem with that is because what we've talked about before is we do not want one player taking up a lot of game time. The problem with when you do that is you tuck it underneath and it's non-deterministic, because with your commander, you have to do die rolls to try to hit it.
Right.
So it's not, all right, I copy expropriates infinite times, I get all your stuff, have infinite turns, and I win. It's, well, maybe I will chain enough expropriates together to win. And so then we just kind of have to sit there and be like, all right, and now we wait.
Yeah, let's be honest and vulnerable here for a second.
Yeah.
How about that? This is the Command Zone podcast. Sometimes it feels like a PowerPoint presentation, and sometimes it's the vulnerability podcast.
Yeah.
So I think with that deck in particular, I do agree with you. Yeah. And I have the same problem with 11 and Max, is if I get Command Performance or Expropriate out under attractions and I can start copying those over and over again, it's like I don't know when this loop is going to end. I don't know when I'm going to get off the ride, and I'm making everybody watch me do this. And sometimes it can be really embarrassing.
Yeah.
Because I'm being so sensitive to the people who are around me, which leaves that deck in the bag on a lot of nights. You have to be with the right group who's willing to sit there and watch you do that. If I meet somebody for the first time and they watch me loop command performance and expropriate over and over again, well, that guy was a jerk.
Yeah.
That guy was an idiot. Why do all his decks are like that? I'm not playing with that person again.
Yeah.
But if I share that one experience with you once, twice a month, you're not going to kill me.
Yeah.
You'll play with me
It's
again.
a cool deck. Like, I've definitely had times where I've been frustrated by that and like, well, here we are again, and I have to wait 20 minutes before we figure out if we win or lose. But also, there have been very cool games with that deck. So it's... And some of them are still off the back of Expropriate. So it's not necessarily like very super well defined, but it is something that you have to be aware of.
Right.
So I think this section is... We've talked a lot about the chess clock, but I think the winning out of nowhere thing is something different, where it's if this spell resolves, the game is over. Where everything we've done up until this point, it doesn't matter because this one spell resolves, right?
Yeah.
And the Expropriate can feel like that, especially if everybody gives you the extra turns. But I think this is like a Torment of Hailfire, or like if you have a Heliod on the board and you resolve a Walking Ballista and I just ping you all to death.
Or are you thinking of another certain card that starts with a T?
And ends with Asa's Oracle.
No.
Thassa's Oracle is a great one.
I was thinking of an experience we had with Triskaidekaphile.
Sure.
Oh,
The ability goes in the stack, and we were all like, oh, wait a second. Wow, it is 13, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lot of
Yes, you win.
A lot of alternate win conditions can feel this way if they don't have the same sort of progressive build to them. And I think that's an interesting thing because you put so much into a game. You've invested so much into this. So if one thing happens that you're like, oh, I guess all of this doesn't matter because you have, 10 treasures or whatever the black enchantment is.
Yeah.
That says if you have 10 treasures, you win the game. Revel in riches.
Infinite combos for me are probably my personal biggest sticking point. I'm not saying that that's the case for everybody, but if you have an infinite combo in your deck, to me, you are now high-powered and you deserve to be treated differently because we are no longer trying to build up until something and then having to pay off for that. You might at any point say, well, I have these two pieces. I play piece one, I play piece two, and I win. And that's
your fire building contest is igniting an engine that doesn't stop.
Exactly, and that's a different type of game than one that, at least personally, I would consider to be casual. Now, that being said, I love games where everybody has infinite combos and everybody is aware that's what we're all trying to do.
Yeah.
CDH. Just high-powered commander where you're all like doing race cars, don't necessarily have the most amount of interaction, but you're just trying to go as fast as you possibly can. Those are very fun games because everybody is aware, here's what we're trying to do. And stories still come out of that.
And the thing about that is, for me, that's not winning out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Because
It's weird.
Because that's the expectation.
Yes.
Well, if this expectation is set at the beginning of the game, where it's like infinite combos are something that we are building to, and if I've tutored twice, you need to be ready.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is a build. That's a different kind of build. But if you're playing in a casual game where the expectation is that we accumulate resources until somebody overwhelms the board, then it feels totally out of nowhere, and you're like, well, I wasn't even fighting on that axis.
Yeah, and to me...
Well, you could bring a jackhammer to this? Like, it's just a totally different thing where that winning out of nowhere feels different.
Yeah, people are always saying, oh, well, my deck is power level this, my deck is power level that. And power level, obviously, we've talked about it before, hard thing to quantify.
Yeah.
But that is the divide that I usually find between casual and high-powered commander. Which are you trying to do? Are you trying to build to something and then do something from that point? Or are you trying to not necessarily just combo off, but win kind of no matter what?
Yeah. So winning out of nowhere, that's a big one that's been talked about a lot. The next rule is interesting because I do think it goes in this same sort of category. It's fast mana is not casual, except Soul Ring. And if you're a 1v1 player, you're like, what?
The most busted and powerful mana rock in the game, probably, or one of top.
Well, those cards are legal and you're not playing them. I think it's the mindset of
And so this is a very interesting thing. I think the difference with Soul Ring is, of course, accessibility.
Yeah.
Everybody has access to Soul Ring, so Soul Ring's fine.
It's $1 or $2.
But if you start talking about Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus and even Mana Vault, I think is treated this way, even though I don't think us would be like really surprised to see a Mana Vault. Those are the kind of cards that if they see play at a progressive table, at an accumulating resources table, people will be surprised.
Yes.
Because they live in a more competitive space. And I think it's because they interrupt this thing that we've been talking about a lot. They interrupt the game narrative, where they give you the gasoline for your fire, right? Where it's like, we're all here with flints. And you brought a flamethrower. And that's not what I was doing.
And that's always the tricky thing is that it's not bad to have one person get out ahead early, but what you don't want is you don't want one person to get out ahead so much, it just makes everybody else's game completely invalidated. You want it to be a challenge. All right, they're ahead. What can we do about it?
Yeah.
And sometimes you band together and you do it, and other times, well, maybe you don't. That does not automatically mean that that person's deck was too powerful, but it can be a very good indicator of that.
Yeah. And I think we can move right on to the next rule, which sort of combines the we don't concede, we don't win out of nowhere, and casual players don't play fast mana, is this game narrative that we've been talking about, where it's like, when I sit down for a commander, like a casual commander game, you sort of expect that we're all going to sort of walk along the path and we're going to run into a problem and we're going to solve it. And then there's a new problem. It's like King of the Hill, where everybody gets to be on top of the hill at some point. And then somebody just ends up on top. And that's sort of what a good game a good casual game sounds like to me, is everybody participated, everybody got to accumulate their thing, and then the game, somebody won, and it doesn't really matter who.
Yeah, I think, Jake, we are in a very unique position because what we do for a job is try to make an entertaining game of Commander with a narrative.
Yeah, how do you have 4 protagonists in any story?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. And in the game nights that we put out, well, sometimes not everybody does the thing. Sometimes one person gets out ahead and they stay ahead and it is what it is. But oftentimes the best ones, the ones that are always the fan favorites that are, oh man, this was my favorite because X, Y, and Z happened, is because there was at least some sort of back and forth.
Yeah, there was an episode that we worked on where we're like, man, this game really just ends with nothing.
Yeah.
So a whole bunch of stuff happens and then it's over. And we reviewed this together. We said, this isn't working. What can we do? And we found what the story was, which was this person handles everything. This person waits for exactly the right moment, acts, and solves the problem.
Yeah.
And we highlight their genius rather than focusing on the other person who's just popping off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because we were like agonizing over this. And then
The best thing in the world happened.
yeah, you can tell, Jake.
So the comments did this too, but Jacob Bertrand comes over and he's like, oh, wow, yeah, guys, I just watched the new Game Nights and this game was amazing. And he basically read off word for word the thesis we came up with.
Yeah. And we were like,
What game was this? They're going to be curious.
I've been cryptic about it because I want you to watch every episode of Game Nights. But
Well, at least tell them what episode it is to watch.
well, I'll give you 2 seconds if you want to pause it and figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
Okay. It was Commander Legends Baldur's Gate.
Yeah.
And this is the game where Josh was going on and on and on. And we've seen people on Reddit talk about it. Like, the editors were so bored with what Josh was doing that they skipped ahead. But what we're doing is by the time you're thinking, oh, man, Josh is just doing the same thing. Oh, it's so boring. We're acknowledging, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
That is what's happening.
and then we'll move on from that point. We'll use that as a springboard to whatever the next point.
And we especially highlighted Lexi's genius of choosing exactly the right moment, because that's what that narrative needed to be for, that's exactly what happened.
And that's a great story to tell.
Right,
It's like
quiet, and then bam.
And I think we think about this a lot because we're content creators, so we know what kind of game makes the best content, makes the most exciting content. But I think when you're playing Commander, you want exactly the same thing that you want from stuff you view. Like the best games that I've come out of would make the best televised games.
Yeah.
Because they're the most exciting, where this person had it, then this person had it, then this one. I couldn't believe you had that. Because if you had that and I didn't have this, that's like what makes Commander games exciting to play, is that exact same narrative that we're trying to create when we make games.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most interesting thing to tell people about how to make Commander more fun, is play toward the fun rather than play toward the win.
Yeah. And again, we do not have the perfect recipe on how to make the best game of Commander. You've seen some games of Game Nights or Externs been like, that wasn't that great. But there have also been some great ones, and we're just trying to take, okay, so what worked about that? Try to be like, all right, what kind of commanders that Josh and Jimmy could play would go towards a good game of Commander? Are all of the decks reasonably balanced? Things like that, I think, are very good indicators of what can make a good game of Commander. But again, it also can just come down to the gameplay itself.
I think the rehearsal of your decks and knowing your lines and all that stuff too.
Yeah.
Like, Josh, when we were looking at the Core 2021 episode of Game Nights, he was building his deck. We were all looking at Subira, and he's like, well, I'm probably going to be casting Ramp on turn 2, which means that I'm going to be doing this because it's a 3-mana commander. And then by the time you're swinging with her, you'll have this many mana available to you because you're probably casting a 3-drop. You activate the commander. And I had just never thought about what is my script? On televised Commander, you get one shot. That's it. So on turn 2, what did you do? Like, you don't play 3-mana stuff in a 4-mana commander deck because 3 mana is turn 3 is where you're casting that commander. And if you know,
we talk about this. I want to highlight it because it's perfect.
Yeah.
We just did an episode about goldfishing.
Oh yeah,
and it's how to goldfish, and we talk about exactly this, where it's like how to learn your deck.
Yeah.
Where you feel like you understand the story your deck is going to take the table through.
You need to know your script and your story because then you can gauge whether or not, am I on plan? Do I have control over my own destiny? Because
is the story fun?
Right. Yeah. That's kind of why it's not super fun to play somebody else's deck is I'll watch the story happen in front of me. Oh, this deck does this. That's interesting. Wait, I get it. Whereas okay, I know what I'm trying to do, and I'm looking at the cards in my hand. I've got removal, card draw, ramp. I got everything you could want, but I still know, for me, that I'm behind.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with I do like playing my own decks, but I also very much understand people who like playing other people's decks because it's like a little bit of a puzzle. You're like, all right, I have this. How can I turn this into a winning position? Here we go.
Yeah.
But knowing your story it makes the story building a lot easier.
I've never thought about it this way, but I love the idea of looking at a deck as a story because some of the stuff that we talked about at the beginning here, right? No mass land destruction, no mass discard, is those make terrible stories.
Yeah.
If the story
every deck is a story.
If the story of your deck is like, I play a land, I play a rock, I blow up the lands, 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 what a terrible story.
Yeah.
It's pretty repetitive.
It's repetitive. Nobody gets to participate.
Yeah.
There's no arc to it. There's no build to it. And the story is what casual players expect in their game, where competitive players don't necessarily expect a story. That a story might happen.
I think Noah's Ark was kind of like that.
I blow up the lands. I blow up the lands. I blow up the lands.
And in 40 days and 40 nights, it's over.
Only happened once.
And then with one single bird, he wins.
Yeah, I love this one. And I think it's going to, if you start thinking about Commander as a story you're telling, that's going to take you a long way in understanding casual Commander and the mindset behind the majority of Commander players.
Yeah, there's a reason behind the madness. We promise, modern players.
All right, we're going to continue on to the next rule, which is don't deny your opponents their commanders. I think these next few rules are the ones that we disagree with the most. So we can talk about them that way. But
let's be clear. We're not saying these are the rules.
Yeah.
No.
These are the rules as we've observed them out in the wild.
These are some rules that I have some suggestions.
I will tell you right now, I disagree with basically every single one of these from here on out.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be an interesting thing because this may not be we have you need to adjust to these beliefs.
Yeah.
But this is about recognizing that these beliefs exist, so you're not blindsided when somebody gets upset that this happens. But what we're doing is just shining light on things that Commander players have expressed rather than saying this is correct and you need to behave accordingly.
Yeah, I hate being on Twitter and seeing, Commander players be like, don't touch my stuff, or just whatever. It's not like that, but you have to understand where they're coming from.
Yes.
There are some Commander players who do get very upset when you counter their commander or when you remove their commander. And I think this is going to be, I've even heard it. I think this is a rule that is expected. And when you counter someone's commander, you keep in mind, if you're in a stranger setting, that this is a reaction that could come out. So you can prepare for it or you can adjust to it. Not necessarily that you don't counter their commander, that you just understand that people don't like it.
Yeah. there might be a spectrum here of get good noob, all the way to I cannot believe you countered my commander, dude. What do you? How rude!
Yeah.
Like you're not even going to let me play this game. You counter my commander. You Darksteel Mutation my commander. What the hell? And in the middle, I'm here saying, you got to be a little tough, okay? Like that stuff is going to happen, and you have to decide how you're going to react to it.
Yeah, and I think this applies largely to not counterspell. I think if you counter somebody's commander, that is of course, but the people get the most salty over stuff that sort of permanently disconnects them from their
Imprisoned
commander,
in the Moon,
Imprisoned in the Moon,
Darksteel
Darksteel Mutation, Drannith Magistrate, anything that really makes your commander not accessible unless you remove a thing. Nevermore. I saw Nevermore on a commander once. That is. Whoo! If you get hit for every single turn for the rest of the game, I would not be surprised. I think commander players expect to have access to their commander. So when you remove that, that's where people get kind of intense.
To be fair, there are so many ways that the rules themselves give you options for okay, if it's going to go into exile from the graveyard, we'll still let you put it in the command zone if that's what you need.
Yeah.
If you're going to discard it, you want to put it in your... Just so many opportunities for it to go in the command zone that the few times that it doesn't, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a boomer here, but
Here we go.
I'm pretty jaded to this because when I first started playing, the tuck rule was a thing. Comment down below if you remember the tuck rule being a thing. So what we used to do is we used to run Chaos Warp and Hinder and Spell Crumble, that type of effect.
And we used to drink out of the hose.
We did, no. To do that against people's commanders. And then your commander would get shuffled into the deck, and you used to, for those who don't know about the tuck rule, nowadays, if your commander gets put into your deck, you can choose to put it into the command zone instead. You used to not be able to do that. It would just get stuck in your library. So that's also one of the reasons why we used to run so many tutors, is that you just needed them to be able to go get your commander again.
But now if it changes any zone, do you want to go to the command zone? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we obviously didn't like that a ton, but that is what we had to deal with, and there wasn't much of a way around it. Whereas something like a Darksteel Mutation, there's so many ways around that.
Yeah.
You
can bounce it, you can remove it,
Yep,
you can blink
exactly.
it.
Or you could just play through the pain.
Yes.
And maybe your deck is built to not need your commander.
And even
That's my next question. Do you build your commander decks to function without their commander?
Yes.
Not all of them.
So all of your decks are ready or definitely function without your commander?
Yes, I think Dan Lewis is the only one that falls apart without the commander.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But I Bludgeon Brawl as backup.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of my decks could tough it out.
Yeah.
Okay. And they would have enough good pieces in them to tough it out.
Yeah.
But Myra the Magnificent for sure is that's just a dip-de-doo instance of sorcery spellslinger deck.
Yeah, it's crazy too because back in the day, commanders were powerful, but definitely not as focused. Nowadays, I think commanders are both more powerful, but also more focused on one specific strategy. And so as a result, your commander, if it's out, is doing one thing, and it's probably doing it really darn good.
Yeah.
And so one of the frustrations that I've had with recent commander designs is that, well, now your opponents have two options. Either try to get rid of the commander, or sit there and let the commander happen to you. Either option is, all right, well, now the player whose commander just got removed is now doing nothing. Or you just get run over by the commander. And those don't feel super great.
Why are you not letting me beat you up with a baseball bat? You don't let me have any fun.
Yeah, cards like Toxrill or Coma or anything like that are very obvious.
I do feel that way about Toxrill and Coma for sure.
I don't love playing against them because it has that problem. You either do the thing or don't do the thing.
So I've built 8, I went through all of my decks, and 8 of my 21 decks are very difficult to make work without their commander. And I recognize that as a weakness of the deck, where it's if my commander gets removed, well, we're going to figure something else out, I guess, and hope I can cobble something together from
the heart of the cards.
But I will say that I think there are people that get particularly salty about their commander getting removed, and I think especially if you have a certain tier of commander, if you have a Coma, if you have an Urza, if you have a Voya is the big conversation right now.
Sorry, it's just going to get removed. I'm so sorry, everybody.
I remember.
I personally don't like it. I'm sorry.
I remember I was in a game, and I was playing with 2 players who were new. And he was like, this is my girlfriend. She's new to the game. She's playing Joda the Unifier. Joda had just come out. Joda had just come out. And it was new player, her partner, and then me and my partner. and she plays Joda. He swords it on that turn. He swords it immediately. And AD and I were like, whoa!
She just got done.
She's new! We were like, she's a new player? And then she cast Joda again, and the next turn she won. And we were like, oh yeah.
got
all right,
it.
now noted.
Yeah.
That's a Brawl deck that we see pretty frequently.
Yeah.
You got to be in the naughty kids tier
You gotta
to
be
get
in the-
rotated
yeah.
into that bracket in
Yeah.
Brawl.
And if you have Joda as your commander, you have to understand that your opponents have to remove it. So it's a little bit of like, if you remove commanders, you understand that there are reactions that people could have to that. And then a little bit of like, yeah, your commander's going to get removed. It's a really good commander.
Yeah.
What? Let me see what you have. A knife.
No! The next rule is do not interact with neutral plays like neutral. And like, have you ever had your ramp spell countered?
Yes.
By a control player who was
Yeah.
maybe learning the ropes. Like,
Yes.
that's understandable. Like,
Yeah.
okay, strategically, maybe don't counter ramp spells. But socially, not countering ramp spells is...
Yeah. I had
don't
we were playing against precons when I was playing a budget deck to play against the precons.
Yeah.
And somebody abraded my locket. And I was like, okay.
What the heck?
Okay, sir. And it felt like like what is going on?
Yeah.
And this is clearly a player who's new to Commander and
Yeah.
it's just like, I have a removal spell, I'm just gonna spend it, and that's an okay way for them to spend it. But it definitely, like, the Commander and player in me came out and was like, what?
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
I think
If you deny my ramp spells, I understand because I'm ramping to something.
Yeah.
If I get to Morophon and Morophon meets the eye, the Transformers are rolling out.
stop it. I'm ramping to something.
The deck is ramping faster than it's melting.
Yeah,
Transformers quotes.
Yeah, Transformers quotes. I think a big distinction for something like this is doing it with players that you know versus strangers. Because for me, I've had one of the players in my pod, they play a land, they play a bounce land, and then have to discard that land to hand size. And I'm like, all right, my turn. Strip mine your thing, pass the turn. And they're like, what the heck? I'm like, this is funny.
Yeah.
But we knew each other, and so we had a good laugh about it. Please
Delete contact.
do not do that. I didn't do that to you, Jake. But I would in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
But do not do things like that against strangers because you just don't know how they're going to react to it, and that's
They might give you a
kind of
physical
bad
slap
form.
on the bottom.
Yeah, not physical slap on the bottom.
Whoop up.
But it's like that kind of thing is just not expected.
Yes.
And it goes beyond the expectation of casual Commander, especially casual Commander with strangers.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you're like, I do want to warn 1v1 players or new Commander players that it's like that kind of thing will elicit a reaction, even though it's probably right.
Yeah.
Like I had a swamp, I had a swamp strip mined, so I didn't get to use an
You'd have the right
expedition
colors.
map.
Oh yeah.
Like to put me off of tutoring with an expedition map, and I was like, that was probably the right play.
Yeah.
But
Also, what the
Jesus, that was aggressive.
Yep.
And those kind of, it sort of in 1v1 where that would be completely normal, in Commander, it's going to get a bit of a reaction.
Yeah.
The
I'm
next
fine
one,
with it.
yeah, I mean that's the thing is like we're talking about the average, I think, reaction to that
Yeah.
kind of thing. The next one is going to be how you deal with players who fall behind, and
It depends.
Yep, because a lot of people are going to be like, "Hey, don't mess with me. I'm not the threat."
I will never say that. I will accept goodwill, but I'll never be like, you guys, I missed my land drop because I kept a bad hand. That's my fault.
Yeah.
Or I made an enemy of Murph and he killed my bounce land.
To be fair, sometimes that does happen. Sometimes you are behind. But the problem is that the threats is so subjective. And somebody saying, oh, well, I'm not the threat. Like that, I've done that in games with you, Rachel.
Yeah.
Where you're like, I'm just behind. I'm not the threat. You all out there have seen games with Rachel where she's not the threats.
I'm
and
trying to hide.
tries to
Skip
hide.
Don't hit
for
me, I'm
I'm doing
hiding.
good.
Rachel and Josh both do this a lot.
Yes.
And
I'm
so-
doing so bad. I don't have anything. I'll just draw 5 cards and
Yeah.
make it 5 dudes. That's all I can do.
At the same time, don't do it just to spite somebody. But if you legitimately feel like that is in your best interest to winning the game, is to keep this person
Yes.
down or try to attack this person, whatever it might be, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, look at Lost Cabins of Ixalan. Prof knew that Josh might look like he's behind,
But he's
you
not.
still got to target him.
Get
Yeah,
him.
exactly.
This is my worst habit in Commander. This is where I get the saltiest, is when I feel like I would do something different and somebody does, and like somebody points it at me.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, I feel like I would behave differently and you're affecting me that way.
The problem is you do not have the information that the person has.
That's the thing.
Right.
Yes.
Is
Right.
I need to
Like-
get out of my own noggin.
I'm going to kill
and
this person with a
remember-
blight steel, and I might have a different plan
Yeah.
for you.
I think a lot of Commander players are going to be like, Commander players have terrible threat assessment, or Commander players have. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It doesn't like.
Yeah, maybe it is wrong with threat assessment.
It might be, but it's their removal spell, and they get to spend it how they want.
I want you to keep talking. Honestly, like, if you're going to talk crap about my place, like, keep going. Because if I win, this is going to be really sweet.
Yeah.
It's going to be really embarrassing for you.
Oh.
if I win.
So I
It
think
doesn't come up much,
I
but-
think the players who are behind thing is one of those things where, like, when you're behind, you're still in the game, because we've all been in Commander games where one player gets left alone because they got behind early and they come back and win the game
Happens all
because
the
they
time.
have not been interrupted in any way.
We're all aiming for that awesome story. And if these 2 people killed each other to death and then person 3 just wins by default, I don't know that that's a great story.
Yeah, I think this is interesting, and I think this is one that Commander players need to adjust to. But there is going to be a feeling that when a player is behind, they are given the benefit of the doubt. Often, if somebody misses a number of land drops, players will be like, tutor a land to the top.
Yeah,
Just put a land
I love
on
doing
top.
that. I love saying,
Yeah.
let's abundance a land.
It's
We're
yours.
all okay
Yeah.
with that, right? And people who would not have had this idea are kind of forced to say yes.
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't love that.
We're
Yeah.
okay with that, right, Murph?
I'm not-
All
I'm not
Murph,
okay with
Murph,
that.
don't-
It's-
he's fine with it.
But
Just
that is a
abundance.
thing that happens in Commander that would
love it.
never happen in any other format, where it's like, oh, you're behind on lands, just take it a land. Because, like,
Let me cast you one.
I have, like, so often in games, it's like, boy, I wish I could give you the land, and I just drew. But I think that's the expectation. And that ties into the next thing, where it's like, we all want everyone to do the thing. And I want to talk about doing the thing, because I've definitely talked about this to a 1v1 player, and they're like, what does that mean? Commander
the
players
thing?
say that all the time. What
Yeah.
is doing the thing?
It's such a nebulous term.
And it means executing the desired plan. We talk about the story that we're trying to write when you build a deck. It's just telling the story accurately and as intended.
It's such a hard line to walk, because oftentimes doing the thing will lead to you winning.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. I did the thing, and I dealt 40 damage to Arthur with a pummeler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
I
then died.
died.
Yeah.
But I did the thing.
But if, say, I had a removal spell in hand and I saw you, like, you put down one piece and you're going to do another piece to do 40 damage to somebody, and I remove the first piece before the second piece comes into play, I feel incredibly justified in doing that.
I feel respected, though,
Yeah.
when that type of thing happens, because you have identified that, yes,
Yes.
I am about to do the thing. I'm about to live the dream.
Yeah, but technically, that stopped you from doing the thing. And so is that bad form?
I don't
No.
think it stops you from doing the thing. Here's
Interesting.
here's the
Very
thing.
interesting.
Is you write a story, right? This is the story of my deck.
Yep.
Things happen along the way in stories all the time that affect the trajectory of that story.
Yep.
And you can get back on the path, or you can choose a new path.
Yeah, setbacks.
I think
that
Joseph
there's-
Campbell said that.
Yeah, there's always bumps, right? And if you write a story for your deck to tell, it should be able to handle some bumps.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is not your responsibility to not bump. It is your responsibility to, tell your own story where you're doing your thing. So you get to impact other people just fine. But I don't think it's like, let everyone do what they want all the time. Don't interact. Because some of the most exciting parts of Commander games are interaction.
Yeah.
Where it's, I thought you were going to do that, but I had this and I had this. And we're like, what?
I was talking to Jim from the Spike Feeders the other day, and he was specifically saying that what your thesis should be whenever you take deck and play with it is that you're trying to appeal to the widest common denominator. And what most people like is they like decks where they are proactive. They are telling their own story.
Right.
So if you are getting into Commander and you're coming from professional, what have you, there are plenty of decks in the more competitive scene that are completely stop what your opponents are doing, and that's the whole point of it.
Right.
If you're coming to Commander with that mindset, you're gonna run into a lot of opposition and a lot of people that are frustrated with that because your deck is not being proactive and telling its own story. If your deck story
just interrupting my story.
If your deck story is
Tell your own
stopping
story.
everybody else's story,
Yeah.
we have a problem.
You need to recognize too how many bullet points are in your story.
Yeah.
Okay. Because if you need to have done the
That
thing,
is a deck building
if you need your
advice.
commander to attack, draw the card, get the right card in your hand, cast a spell for free, and then when you cast that spell, it doesn't get countered, and then that leads to another spell which might win the game because you'll draw your whole deck, but we'll see. And then Thoracle for the win. Like, if that is your story, maybe switch to a +1/+1 counters deck.
Maybe a more straightforward story.
Yeah, Jim from the Spike Feeders, he's a good friend of mine.
Jim's a good friend of all of ours.
Yes.
Friend of the channel, friend of mine. Anyway, years ago, long time ago, we go back.
Before I met you,
You know,
a long time ago.
This had to be like 1990. Who can remember? I was telling him about, man, I just built this +1/+1 counter deck, okay? And it's Ishai and who's the Rayhan?
Rayhan.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So I built this deck, and all I did was I looked up on Scryfall every single card that said +1/+1 counter, and I looked at all 1,400. And the cool thing about it is with such a broad strategy that's everywhere in Magic, you can make a really tight deck that does exactly what you want it to do. And you have a lot of options. You're not like, well, yeah, I'm playing all the good Transformers and all the bad ones. No, you're just playing the good cards.
Yeah.
And in the middle of this process, I was like, man, I have never deck built like this before. It feels so clean. And he said this because you're focusing on your primary stuff. You don't say, okay, here's all my primaries, and here's my secondary strategies of if I'm going to make all those counters, why don't I use those counters for something? Then you have your tertiary strategies of if I'm already using counters for things, then why don't I do this that cashes in on that too? Like, no, focus on those primaries.
Yeah.
Because when you get blown out, you're starting back at square one, but if you have only one square,
Yeah, that's a big deck building thing. That if your deck
That
has
story-
multiple things.
I think that's also a really
That's problems.
important point for people who are coming from outside of Commander to Commander is that Commander decks tend to be very thematic.
Yeah.
Where it's like, if I'm doing a +1/+1 counter deck, all of my cards are related to +1/+1 counters. It's not like a modern deck where it's like, well, every deck has 2 Ragavans and 4 Ren and 6s, and then like mine just happens to have a domain package as opposed to the Cascade package.
Yeah.
It's Commander, you're like, I'm building a vehicles deck.
With a Soul Forger package.
Whole deck is vehicles. It's
Yeah.
a vehicle plan.
even my removal and my card draw and my ramp.
Yeah, all of it. We're like that is a big expectation, I think, in Commander decks. Is if you're building a casual deck, it's not just a pile of good stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm building on a
committing.
very strong theme. Like
Yeah.
you have a little guy's deck where it's like everything's power is under 2.
Yep.
That's
Two
just
or under.
2 or yeah. And that's just the whole deck is like that. And if somebody plays a Toxrill, whoop, the whole deck plan doesn't work.
We literally had an extra turns where this happened.
The whole
played a
plan
Toxrill.
is now off.
And I was sad. I think the deck fought back pretty good.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, did not win.
It
but
did. It's so that's the kind of thing that you expect when you're deck building. The next question I have written down because I want to summarize these. We went through a lot of rules, and I want to talk about. A lot of people are like, Commander players have all these unwritten rules. All these unwritten rules. Somebody write them down. It was like, we did. Should they be on the rules committee website? Should they be a rule?
Eric, can you make the text really big right here?
Yeah, big one.
No.
No. Because these rules don't apply to everybody. Like, they just don't.
We've
The
literally
rule-
talked about it
You
where some of
play
these...
Tournament of Hellfire and
Yeah.
you play Expropriate and I play neither, and that those are totally different
Some
boundaries.
of us play mass land destruction, others don't.
I do.
If you're
yeah.
trying to be like a computer and try to you don't understand what's going on. And for some people, to be honest with you, as I say this, I kind of think, it doesn't hurt to help somebody who kind of might have a harder time socially understanding. Like, here's how not to be a jerk. But the way I would lead that horse to water is like saying, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to make everybody have a good time? Do you think that this action right here is going to hit, like, door to nothingness?
Yeah.
As long as it's really hard for you to do this, door is fun.
Yeah.
If it's easy, it is not fun.
Yep.
Like the nuance, like you got to build that decision tree of here's why things end up being not fun, rather than having, please don't play door to nothingness unless it's really hard for you to accomplish your goal.
Because then if it's a building up to it, you can see it happen. It comes in, it's tapped. Oh, shoot, it's going to go off next turn. Can anyone do anything about it? Nope. Laser beam goes off. Somebody dies.
And
That's
Josh
a
says,
good story.
wow, so Jimmy's untapping here, and he's got door to nothing. He's got a mana to do it. Now, I'm going to try to talk to him and see if I can work something out to see if he wants to take out maybe Rachel. Josh, I will activate door to nothingness, targeting you. Well, I knew this was going to happen. Luckily,
Jake said
I
it too much game nights. It's got to his head.
All right, I will tap 6, and I will cast Sublime Epiphany.
Ooh.
Wow, so this card is great.
I want to talk about this because I do think that like Commander players, like a lot of people come to Commander and they don't like the nuance. They don't like that. They're like, if you're gonna be mad about it, ban it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Commander isn't. Our ban list isn't to control power level or balance any power level. That's up to you.
Yep.
The Commander, tier. I think the way that you can handle think of Commander like a hockey beer league is how I think about it.
That's great.
Where it's like, when you want to play hockey, you're an adult. There's no I'm not going to play in the NHL, of course, because I'm not at that tier. But I do want to play hockey. And you show up to a rink, and most rinks will have like a gold, a silver, and a copper league. And the gold league is like ex-college players, and they're here to play hockey, and they're here to play well. And they will do everything to play well. And the copper league is like, no, I like hockey and I want to play hockey, but mostly it's about hanging out with my friends who play hockey and going to Wings after. And those two people are both playing hockey. They're both playing Commander, but they have totally different expectations of what is going to happen when they get on the ice. Because the Copper League people are like, do not hit me. I have to go to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
And the gold tier players are like, if you don't hit me, I'll be mad.
Yeah. And so you obviously should not put those in the same game together.
No.
Problem is, it's a self-selected thing.
Yeah.
Technically, the person in that gold could have said, no, I'm going to go in the copper league.
Yeah.
I think that's where I belong. So it's very much a conversation. Sit down, talk to your play group, especially if you're at somewhere that you haven't played before. Talk with the people that you're about to play with. What is the expectation for this game?
Yeah.
I had a really great time with my cousin one time where I was like, oh, you got a pre-con? That's really fun. All right. So we shuffle up and, his brother's there. He's playing a pre-con. My brother played a deck that he built years and years ago.
Yeah.
And so I'm playing my doofus deck that I have. Okay. And he slaughters me. And I said, okay, well, you're going to be tried as an adult. And so I pull out one of the big nasties, like those moments where you take that hit to know where you're at.
Yeah.
Like you kind of need a pilot game to feel out a group.
Yeah, it's totally understandable if you get it wrong the first time.
Takes a lot of time.
If you are in a game against somebody for the first time and they get it wrong, do not be upset at them.
Give them
Please.
the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly. If this becomes a regular thing, then we got to talk about it. Maybe it's time to say, hey, this is something that I'm becoming frustrated with. Maybe if they continue it past that, find another person to play with, whatever that might look like. But if it's the first time, please, please, please just give them the benefit of the doubt.
There's a really, really, really short list of people where I'm like, yeah, I think I'd rather just not play rather than play with you. And I've been playing for years.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's only like a few instances where I've been like, that pod is not for me. It's more like, how do I show up to that pod?
Yeah.
How do I prep for that group? Because I know that these people like to play like this. Like you talked about Dovescape a long time ago. Maybe not Dovescape. Don't play that here.
Don't. I could tell the Dovescape story really quick. I came from a play group that was really, really casual and obviously had a huge swing in power level, right? We had Chainveil Teferi all the way down to I was playing the -1/-1 Hapatra. And
that can be good.
It was fine. It wasn't that well supported at the time, but
not as good against.
It wasn't Chainveil Teferi, I'll tell you that. But our play group really, really liked Dovescape. A lot of people played Dovescape. In multiple decks, we had Dovescape. And Dovescape is a card. It's an enchantment for 6 mana that says if someone would cast a non-creature spell, that spell is countered, and they get birds equal to its mana value instead.
An enchantment that.
go bird.
There we go.
An enchantment that sticks around that says counter that spell.
Counter that spell. And
That's going to make people mad.
But we thought it was so funny.
Like, it's birds now.
Because
Pops into birds.
you were like, all right, I guess we're all playing birds now. And you just make birds. And we were happy to do that. And then I brought Dovescape to a game store when I moved to Los Angeles. And boy, did they not want to play against Dovescape. And boy, was that something that had to be explained to me.
I like that
were
card.
They were like, do you have a plan for Dovescape? And I was like, other than playing it? No, I don't. It's
birds.
Here.
Birds.
It makes birds.
It makes birds.
And I thought that was
man,
hilarious.
you should have played that in your Game Nights Live deck.
Oh my god.
Messed up.
Why did we do that?
And those are things that you learn. And I had to learn that because somebody at my game store was like, hey, if you're going to play something that is highly interactive like Dovescape, you need to have a way to capitalize on it, to win the game afterward.
We love those people who give us that talk. Like that friend who's a real friend because they'll pull you aside. I had Eric Landis one time, who's a longtime supporter of the channel. Eric, we love you, and thanks for inviting me to Commander. Again, even after I ruined the night with Teysa Orzhov Scion, I went infinite
Strong
with
one.
it, and it was like turn 4 or something.
Oh my gosh.
He politely let me know, like, we would just have to shuffle up again. It's not that that's wrong. It's not that it's bad, but like he politely and took care of business between friends.
And I think that's what makes this conversation really interesting is like that doesn't happen in modern. Like you show up
to my house.
Like you show up with an underpowered deck to a modern tournament, you get wrecked, and then you realize you need to have a different kind of deck.
I'm just imagining like vintage cube. You like pull your opponent aside afterwards, like, hey man, I really didn't like.
It was really inappropriate for you to play that Black Lotus.
I really didn't like that you showed and told in an Emrakul on like
Obviously,
turn 1.
and this is a vibe that most Commander players or most Magic players don't have to deal with, right?
Yeah.
Most Magic players just play their cards, and that's what it is. But Commander players, there's feelings, and there's time and respect, and like those things exist in other formats as well. But
it's not like in 1v1, they're like, hey, you forgot your deck.
yeah, but those aren't related to the cards, right?
Yeah.
Those are related to like actual social things, which in Commander those exist too. But like the cards you play is whatever. The cards in Commander, there's a different level of treatment for cards. And I want to say, because people have asked me this before, where I get somebody tweeted me and say, which cards are morally wrong?
Morally.
That's a great question.
No cards. No cards are morally wrong.
What?
No, like they're never. It is not about the card.
No.
It is about how you deploy them and what your intention is behind them. If you have an expropriate and you're like, you know what, I'm going to loop this and I know how I'm going to do it and I'm going to do it as respectfully as possible, then it's not about expropriate. It's not about Winter Orb. There's nothing morally wrong with playing cards that are completely legal. But there is a different level of social expectation when you come to Commander that means that certain cards have more consideration than others. Where if you sit down with a Winter Orb, you have to be like, are we okay with a Winter Orb game?
Yeah.
Because I will adjust my deck for that.
I flashed back because I'm trying to think of cards that are morally wrong.
Well, there are cards that are morally wrong. They're banned for art reasons and historical reasons. But
yeah, the card Overwhelming Splendor.
Yeah.
That same Commander night. We were lucky enough to have the professor over on this evening.
Oh, wow.
And I believe it was my friend Kevin I was sitting across from. He's like, oh, I have a Slivers deck. And Prof was like, oh, I have a Slivers deck too. And he brings them out and it's like 2 Slivers players. And I think, I can't let this continue. Kevin, I'm going to play Overwhelming Splendor on you. They're all 1/1 humans. Good luck with your Slivers deck.
have a nice time.
Bye, have a great time.
I think that was morally wrong.
It's... that's the thing, because it's like these are all social decisions and it's not about what the card does.
Wasting somebody's time on purpose
Yes.
or going against their will, because I am willing to play a game where I get blown out. I'm not willing to play a game with somebody who's just messing with the game for fun.
Yeah, there was a guy in our playgroup that had a stack of board wipes and the if you cast it for Approach of the Second Sun. That was the deck. It was just board wipe, board wipe, board wipe. Yeah, and that was the deck. And you were like, this is not a respectful deck.
Yeah.
This is not a good use of your time. It is not hard to play. It is not hard to build. It is not like, and it wastes our time because it doesn't. Like, sure, it's a valid strategy, I guess, but I get the totally valid choice of never playing with you or that deck again.
Yep. TLDR, for all these unwritten rules of Commander, the only thing we're going to write down is Try to be cognizant of your playgroup and their feelings, and don't be a jerk.
Have a conversation.
Yep.
Yeah. The reason that this episode exists is not to codify any of these as rules, not to bullet point them and write a 10 commandments or anything like that. It's to give you an idea of the kind of belief systems that exist in Commander and what you can expect when you're sitting down at the average Commander table. And if you're not sure how to navigate these, and this episode didn't help, the thing that can help the most is by asking questions of the people you're across from. How do you feel about mass land destruction? How do you feel about mana denial? How do you feel if I play this commander? Let them communicate and have another plan, either by not playing that game or by playing a different deck. We should mention, while having Rule Zero conversations with the people you're playing with is the best way to find out what is appropriate for any given game, you can also get great indirect information on the Commander Rules Committee website. Check out the Commander philosophy document that illustrates the intentions and mindset behind the format and even the reasoning behind a lot of the specific bans. If you have any questions about the philosophy, Rule Zero, or the Commander ban list, the RC also has a Discord that's a great resource for exactly that. We'll have a link in the show notes.
Yep.
To the listeners, what unwritten rules have you seen in Commander in your area? What piece of advice would you give to players who are new to Commander and new to the social contract of Commander in general? How do you navigate it personally? It is not an easy thing to navigate. Obviously, we're all doing our best, and we don't all agree on it.
Yeah.
We play a lot of Commander.
There's a lot of things Murph's willing to do that I'm not willing to do, and things that I do that Murph is like, yeah, I know why he did that. But
Yeah, I don't know why I did that.
good luck.
If you want to pick up any of the Magic cards that we talked about today, Dovescape, for example, go to cardkingdom.com.
5 copies.
/command, and you can support the show while you're doing so. We love Card Kingdom because they have a huge selection of Magic product, singles, sealed product in all of the conditions and all of the versions that you're looking for. If you're building a highly thematic vehicle deck and you want exactly this version because it matches all my other versions, it's great to shop at a place that has a huge selection of cards because you can buy them all in one package, which means you're only paying shipping one time. You're only tracking one package.
And make sure you poke around that website too, because there's a lot of cool stuff in all those sub menus of like, oh, I didn't even know they made these.
I love just going to the foil side and just
no, that's dangerous. That's dangerous.
Cruise through the foil side. Again, you can pick up Magic cards, which you know you're going to do, your Magic players, and you can support the show by going to cardkingdom.com/command.
And you can pick up Ultra Pro products at ultrapro.com/commands. They have all of the coolest products to protect your game pieces. They look the best. They're the neatest. They have the license with Wizards to have actual Magic the Gathering themed products. You can get the sleeves, deck boxes, whatever it might be to match that commander that you're building. And if you go to their websites, ultrapro.com/commands, they'll have flash sales all the time. You can go find sales of all sorts of neat stuff that, again, you didn't even know existed. Just click around, see what fun stuff is out there, and you might be surprised that you can get something super neat for not that much. Again, ultrapro.com/command.
Like a deck box with a Bluetooth speaker in it.
Is that a thing?
You can
Yes.
do that?
There was a satin tower with
What
a
Ultra
Bluetooth
has?
speaker in it. Yes.
What commander would you put in a blue? You need like,
A blaster.
You need 3 dogs.
It's Blaster.
Yeah.
And 3 dog was the DJ.
Oh. I'll need 2 then.
Finally, if you're a patron or you want to become a patron, you can audition for extra turns. Submit a 2-minute video about your pet card and why it's your favorite. All of the details, all of the terms and conditions are going to be in the show notes. Go in there and click it.
It'll be a fun day. You get to hang out with all of us, and it'll be a hoot and holler.
You get to say hello to us in person. And we will feel honored because we get to shake your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get to tell us all of your unwritten rules and why you think we're so bad at this game and all that stuff.
Or you can do that right now, just in the comments. Tell us why we're bad, why we're wrong.
What's that on your shirt? Is that a comment right there?
Before we go, I want to say thank you to our amazing team here at the Command Zone. Thank you to Damon Lentz, Eric Lem, Megan Yip, Gaurav Galati, Jordan Pridgeon, Jamie Block, Arthur Meadowcroft, Manson Lung, Sam Waldo, Evan Limburger, Katie Cole, Mitch Trafford, Jimmy Wong, Josh Lee Kwai, and of course to Josh Murphy and Jake Boss for taking the time to talk about Commander today.
Much.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeeQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.